Hello, Steve White, Trek Boy 89 for Steve Arts 89, Star Trek's Alleged Gatekeeper. I just watched Star Trek Strange New Worlds Episode 3, Ghosts of Illyria. Now, I enjoyed the episode. I was actually waiting for the episode, looking forward to the episode. It's the first episode of Star Trek in like 5 years I've been looking forward to. So this is a change. It's a good change. But apparently, if you like Star Trek Strange New Worlds, you're not a Star Trek fan, I've been told. So apparently I've lost my status because I actually like the series. But it does have issues. If you view it as a reboot, it's fine. If you view it as a continuation of the other shows, it fails in many ways. But if you just view it as a reboot, which it is, I find it quite enjoyable, with just a couple little issues. Now, this episode starts off with one of the only three shots of the Enterprise for the episode, which is not enough, and they're all very dark. We see the Enterprise come in from above over the planet, and we see we've seen this sort of firestorm in space, because that's what it looks like. It just looks like fire and smoke, but above the planet. And it feels like somebody just was like, hey, why don't we have a fire in space and just have smoke? And like that was someone's idea of something being visually clever or something. And I'm like, it's supposed to be an ion storm, and that doesn't say ion storm to me. It just doesn't quite work. But it's interesting to look at. But so we have that, and we're down on the planet, and what we discover is that we have a race of genetically engineered humans called the Illyrians, who have been basically the outcasts because of the genetic engineering outlawing on Earth. They have had to live off-world and they're outsiders. Now, what these people do apparently is they don't terraform planets, they change themselves genetically to suit the planet. So, but they've gone missing, we don't know why, and there's a away team down on the planet looking for them. They don't find anything, but they have to beam up because the ion storm is getting closer, and there's an issue transporting with the ion storm. Now, Hammer comes in and performs a miracle and gets them up, but not all of them. He gets most of them, but he leaves Spock and Kirk. Now, one of the few issues with the episode, of course, is seeing the race swap transporter chief Kyle, because it just reminds me this is a reboot. And like I said before, if they had just taken the Asian transporter chief that was in the cage and built a character around him, which would have been creative and original, we wouldn't have that little conflict where you look at him and you go, that's not Kyle, this is a reboot. It's like a little reminder I don't need. But so that's one of the little gripes, and that's probably going to be a gripe for every episode he's in, because it's going to remind me that we're watching a reboot. And April if he shows up. So, but not have an issue with the actor. He's cute. He does a good job. Yeah, they have a scene where Una goes up to the bridge and she has to tell everyone Pike and Spock are stuck on the planet, and we're just going to have to do our jobs and wait, and they just hope they're okay, because basically they're hiding in the one of the buildings, of course, while the ion storm passes. Now, what we slowly realise is that something came up with the away team, and we see a guy in the hall, and it's interesting to see the Starfleet regulation underwear. We see a undershirt, trunks, and long socks, and he's standing in the hall in his underwear, and Ortega's like, what are you doing? And he's just staring at the light through the glass in the wall panel in the corridor, and then he smashes his head through it to get closer to the light. So people they have some severe vitamin D deficiency, and they are craving light and trying to get as close as possible as light as they can, and they're hurting themselves and burning themselves. So eventually they take them all to sickbay. Now, Una was affected, but she suddenly glows orange, and then she's cured. And we find out later why, but she doesn't tell. She lies to Mbenga and doesn't tell him that she had it, so she seems to be the only one who doesn't. But then everyone else on the crew starts getting it just through contamination from everyone else. They have to lock down the whole crew. Now, Uhura doesn't get sick, even though she's sharing a cabin with two boys who have it, because apparently she has to sleep in total darkness. And they have these little pods for beds where basically they can shut the door and basically they can cut off all silence and light, which is good. So it's hard to sleep in the same room with people. So it does make sense if you're going to make people share cabins to make it, unlike, say, in the 24th century in lower decks. They just have like bunks and everyone can see what you're doing, and how can you sleep with people walking around? I wouldn't be able to. So that's a nice little advance on what they had in lower decks. But yeah, so she's immune, and they're trying to work out why. It's because she shut herself off in the darkness, so they realise they have to shut the whole ship down to cure everyone. And the weirdest thing about it all is seeing Uhura in a Durag, because I'm like, it's the 23rd century. You're telling me in the 250 years that have passed since now, with all the technology and technological advancements, that beauticians haven't found a way to lay a sister's wave? I just don't get it. And she's not even spinning anyway, so I'm like, why is she wearing a do-rag? I thought she just had like a micro afro. I don't know. I'm not an expert in black female hair. So, but at least it matches her whole outfit. But it's all kind of grey and dull, and I'm like, this is not the Uhura I was expecting. So they do seem to be trying to give us a very different Uhura. I'm not going to go into that. But yeah, so they shut the whole ship down to darkness. And that's where we see the second shot of the Enterprise, I think, for the whole episode, where it's just floating in space, and the only light you can see is the lights of the ship, and then they go off, and it's basically all in black except the Buzz cells, which I guess is red light, so it's different or something. But down on the planet, Spock is trying to do more research, and eventually they are aware of these like fire creatures, entities that are in the ion storm, and they're attacking the building. So they try to break in. They actually cut Spock's neck, but because he's not human, they miss the carotid artery because it's not where it would be in a human. We actually see Spock bleed green, which is good because they don't do his makeup properly in this show. He's supposed to be a copper colour, but they have him looking a nice, healthy shade of earthly pink. He still bleeds green, but he's got like a pink skin like a normal person. So they really need to give him the proper Leonard Nimoy, green copper sort of colour. But yeah, so that's confusing because after that, when the storm eventually breaks through the building and the entities break through the door, they actually shield Pike and Spock. I guess if we're going to start shipping them, which I kind of wouldn't mind because they're both cute, we can call them Spike, can't we? I don't know. Did I just come up with that? No, someone else would have done that. They shield them and they save them. And I'm like, were they just trying to kill them? That didn't make any sense. But they do. They survive. The storm passes. They beam up to the ship and they find out that, I forgot, there's different little reactions. Like Hammer tries to beam up part of the planet's core to get enough heat because he just can't get enough heat and light. And no one has to stop him because she's sort of running around saving the whole ship. La'an tries to blow up the ship basically so she can be washed over by the antimatter because she's wanting the light and the heat that much. And they actually have a fairly brutal fight, and they're arguing because she's upset that Una didn't tell her that she was genetically engineered, because Una reveals that she is an Illyrian, and she's kept it from everyone. She lied to Starfleet and she lied to her friends, and they have a nasty exchange, and no one actually backhands La'an because of something she said. I'm like, that's not exactly evolved behaviour, and not something I expected from number one. So, but basically she is exposed to radiation, and she has another reaction to cure the disease, and she's able to also cure La'an, and they're able to get antibodies from her, so they're able to get a cure. Although I thought the darkness cured it, but I'm not exactly sure. I thought the darkness cured it, but they actually had to use that as well. So maybe it's a combination or whatever. I just realised that I either missed something because I was writing notes, or that didn't make sense. I don't know. But either way, they cure it. She outs herself in order to help, and then she goes to Pike and she's like, I lied to get into Starfleet. Basically, here's my communicator. I resigned basically. And he's like, no, this is ridiculous. I learned these people, the ones actually down the planet were trying to de-engineer themselves so they could join Starfleet. And he's like, this is discrimination. It's wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. Genetically engineered people aren't automatically all like Khan or all evil. So, which is something that Leanne suffered through. So he's like, we're not going to tell them. And she's like, well, what happens if they find out? And he's like, well, we'll fight them, basically. I'm like, well, what you should be doing is telling Starfleet about this and then petitioning based on the fact that she's such an exemplary officer and it is discrimination. But they don't do that. They hide it. So that's not exactly, not a lot of integrity there. That's kind of disloyal. And what is that thing you can be charged with? Either way, I'm like, I know he wouldn't agree with it because it is discrimination, but hiding it, lying about it, not confronting it directly, I didn't like that with the characters. So that was my main issue with the episode, because I just don't feel like that is Starfleet officer behaviour, and I don't think they would have done that. And it does sort of set up, again, the Federation as this big bad, and they're like victims of it. And they're like, there's like camaraderie in the field against the regulations and the sort of the big organisation. It's not really how Starfleet worked in Star Trek, where they took care of everyone and everyone was equal. Like this idea that, well, we're just going to hide this secret so you're not discriminated against. It just doesn't really work. So that's really my only complaint for the whole episode. Oh, and also I forgot about Mbenga. He was trying, when they were doing a diagnostic to try and work out how this bacteria, because it's not bacteria, it's basically how the virus spreads is through light, but it got on the ship because Mbenga didn't have the medical transporter upgraded because he was hiding his daughter in the pattern buffer because she's got a disease that can't be cured, and he's keeping her there hoping to find a cure during his adventures on the Enterprise. So that's kind of interesting. He basically brings her out of the transporter every now and again to visit and read her stories and talk to her and that, because he's got a certain amount of time that she can live, and if he can spread that out over time, he can still sort of spend time with her. And like I said, he's just hoping to find a cure while he's out in space. That's kind of interesting. And again, it's a secret, but number one, she says, look, it's fine. We will just set up a separate energy source so this doesn't happen again. And, you can basically keep your hope alive. I'm not going to take that away from you, even though regulations would have some issues with what you're doing. And again, it's another person not sort of following Starfleet regulations, and I'm not really sure how I feel about that as part of this show. But that's my only complaint for the episode, and I've talked a lot longer than I planned to. I tried to do a shorter video, sorry. But there's a lot to think about, a lot to talk about, and that's it though. I think I covered everything. I enjoyed it. And then we get the last shot of the Enterprise, only one of three, not enough shots, and it's too dark. Basically, the Enterprise just leaving the planet with the Iron Storm in the background. And that probably will be my thumbnail, one of those. It was really hard to find a thumbnail for this episode because there's like 3 episodes of the Enterprise and they're all dark. But yeah, I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think of the episode. I'm glad that they actually showed that La'an knows knows her heritage, and everyone else does. I for a while thought it was a secret, and we were in on it, but the Starfleet crew and Starfleet wasn't in on it. They didn't know who her ancestry was, and there was this rumor that she was going to be a sleeper and all this, and apparently none of that's true because everyone knows it, and she just wasn't penalised for an ancestor being genetically engineered, because she may be a descendant of him, but she's not directly related. She wasn't actually engineered herself, so she's been able to enter Starfleet and not have any real discrimination. But she did talk about being discriminated against and isolated because of the eugenics wars and the prejudice on Earth against the genetically engineered. But that's a whole other issue. I'm going to go. Thanks. Bye.